'Tis I, your old pal King Chuck. I hope you're having an awesome day. Ah, I'm at the park right now, and there's a giant haze right across the street from us. Yeah, of course, right now we're at the epicenter of the giant. Um, oh, what is it? That giant wildfires in Canada that have wreaked havoc on the northern portion of this country. I heard that New York State is getting it too, and the biggest affection, it's affecting Marquette big time. Yesterday, on Wood TV8's weather forecast, they had Blake Harms. He was supposed to be outdoors, but he decided, yeah, they're going to do it indoors because he just couldn't be outside. And I heard that they got some space, they got a makeshift studio space because of this. Believe it or not, from Emily Leonard. Yeah, she works for MSU now. Yep. For those who don't remember Emily, she worked at Wood TV8 for many, many years. She was the longtime morning host on the Daybreak show, their morning show. So she said, "Oh, you're from Wood TV8. Come in." Yep. Stay away from the smoke. But it's not as bad this morning as it has been in past days. It's supposed to clear up this afternoon, which is good news because I'm going to Upheaval this afternoon. I'm going to be out of here about noon. I'm going to stand in line, get into the doors are opening at noon, 1 o'clock actually, and then, I know where I'm going to be parking, I hope. Because if not, I'm going to be so pissed if I'm going to have to walk 30 miles. Oh, man. I have not been to the Acrisure Amphitheater yet. I heard the parking there is horrible, too. Yeah. So, anyway, let's move on. We have a couple of heroes of the day. Hero of the day, number one, a true friend to the First Amendment. Mary Morello died this week at 102 years old. Mary was the mother of the great Tom Morello, guitarist of Rage Against the Machine, Audio Slave, Prophets of Rage, and a few other projects here and there. Of course, his son, Roman, he's only like 14, 15 years old, and he is a shredder on the guitar at his age. He is just like Dad. And the story was Mary was a school teacher for many years who also was an activist. And one of the things that she loved to do was to tell parents that rock and roll is not your enemy. So here's the story. Way back in the 80s, she founded an organization called Parents for Rock and Rap. So here's the story. Back in the 80s, the religious right and people like Tipper Gore were all telling parents, keep your kids away from rock and roll because, it's not the rock and roll of the 50s anymore. It's all about Satanism. It's all about sex, and a lot of it contains bad words and wham, 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 wham. So anyway, Tipper Gore, she founded the Parents Music Resource Center. So then what happened was Tipper then so this is what happened. Mary basically said, look, kids are going to learn this stuff anyway. And, if you are a true parent, you need to give your kids the freedom of expression. Like I'm giving it to my son, who, of course, will later become, the guitarist of Rage Against the Machine. So that's exactly what happened. Tom Morello was, he really, truly embraced his mother. Mary would would introduce Rage Against the Machine. I've seen videos of her introducing her son and the other members of Rage and on stage, and it's like she was truly that band spirit animal. And of course, Mary was was a longtime co-host of Tom's Sirius XM show, One Man Revolution, and he had a couple of shows on Sirius XM. And she was on there well past 100 years old. Yeah, Mary, I think, was like 39 when she gave birth to 39, like 40. I'm trying to think of how old she was, like 41. Yeah, she waited a little bit to have Tom. And I think Tom's biological dad was like an African immigrant. I don't remember who he was. But, yeah, obviously, Mary gave Tom her last name. And so anyway, you look at Tom and the great career he's had. He's been one of our real freedom fighters for such a long time. And, not only that, Tom was also is also a friend to Traverse City, my hometown. He and Michael Moore helped to set up the film festival up there, and if you go to the State Theater downtown, you'll see Tom's giant handprints. He has huge hands. Yeah, his hands are definitely bigger than mine. I mean, he's probably a lot taller than I am too. But anyway, but here's the thing, folks. There's that old saying, behind every good woman is a good man, and behind every good man is a good woman, and Tom was very blessed to have a wonderful mom who not only cared about him, but also his career and in the careers of others. And like I said, you have to understand, these people who really wanted to go after rock music in the 80s, they all had worse problems. You look at, back in the early 80s, there's a viral video going around of Paul and Jan Crouch from TBN and their son, Paul Jr., and they were playing all these rock records backwards, and they were saying that these, they have hidden satanic messages, and you should never allow your kids to listen to this junk. And okay, so let's explain the relationship between Paul and Jan Crouch and Paul Jr. They had a huge falling out, folks, many, many years ago. Paul and Jan Crouch, of course, had a falling out with Paul Jr. because a lot of it had to do with the fact that Paul's daughter, Kara, was raped by a TBN employee, 30-year-old TBN employee, male employee, when she was only 13 in a hotel room. And, it led to Paul Jr. and his wife getting divorced, and, a lot of breakups in the family, and, the fact that it all came out that Paul and Jan Crouch were preying after poor people to make their money. And I'm like, man, Ozzy Osbourne said it best, that he formed Black Sabbath because he and his bandmates loved horror films. And that's what it boiled down to. Come. Yeah, I'm walking my dog today. And she is the hunter, unfortunately. Come. Yeah, she's going to get burrs all over her body. And now her leash is now wrapped around a plant. Oh, Jesus Christ. I'll try to talk. So, anyway, let's get back to what we were talking about here. So, Paul and Jan, a lot came. You see, folks, there's a difference between being an entertainer and being a grifter, in my opinion. And, I look at, come! Yeah, damn it, dog. Anyway, so that's how I look at Paul and Jan Crouch. They are professional. They were professional grifters, and they lived an exorbitant fortune. I don't want to hear, but I don't want to hear. Well, Ozzy's worth even more. Yeah, well, Ozzy didn't go on TV and beg for money and lie to people like these assholes did. Now, as for Rage Against the Machine, and Tom Morello, it's amazing that Tom did so much for Traverse City, considering that all the radio stations in town would never play his music. And KLT was very anti-Rage Against the Machine in the 90s. I mean, come on, they anti-rap in general. And, KLT, they knew their audience. It's all a bunch of hicks and the backwoods hicks who moved up to northern Michigan to get away from Detroit and black people. That's the audience. So, anyway, I can go on and on, but, Mary Morello was a friend of rock and roll. And, she made it to 102 years old, and God bless her for that. Anyway, and speaking of friends of rock and roll, second hero of the day, Dave Kendall, passed away this week. And there was some dispute on how old he was. Wikipedia said that he was 68, but another report said that he was 63. So, here's the story. So, Dave Kendall was a rock music journalist for many, many years. And back in 1986, he created one of the most revolutionary music programs ever in TV history, 120 Minutes for MTV. And that show helped to introduce millions of people to alternative rock music and helped to change the way... Dog's doing it again. Yeah, my hunter dog is probably seeing... Here's what happened. At home a few nights ago, she actually thought she saw, we have a glass entertainment center, and she took off one of the panelings because she thought she saw something. She was smelling something underneath it. Come! Jeez. So, and it's like I had to show her. There's nothing in there. You can see through it. Dumb dog. There's no squirrels underneath, or rabbits, or anything you want to hunt and kill, or moles. Yeah, she was a mole hunter during her first life in Kentucky. Yeah, my dad used to have a ton of moles on his property, and then he got the dog, and no more moles. So, the rest of the story was that so anyway, here's the rest of the story. So he created the show 120 Minutes, aired Sunday nights on MTV at 12 midnight. But here's the story. A lot of well-known music videos got their first play on that show. Most famously, Smells Like Teen Spirit by Nirvana. Now, up until that point, Nirvana was this very, they only had very moderate success. They were around since the late 80s, and they released a few albums at that point, but then came Smells Like Teen Spirit, and the floodgates opened. And that video was played on MTV almost non-stop throughout the early 90s. And then, all the grunge bands and all the... there were a lot of bands that they played that didn't get played at all. I mean, the video got played once, and that was it. But, believe it or not, there was one... I'm going to tell you this. There was one song that they played on 120 Minutes when I was a kid. It was when the show was going off the air for the night. It was the last video of the night. And I kind of said to myself, this person is going to make it big. And the song was called Shadow Boxer. And it was by a woman named Fiona Apple. Yeah, I kind of predicted for some reason that song would be a hit, and it was. And Fiona had a kind of an interesting career. You know, I guess she's about ready to release a new album. She of course released an album that had a kind of a weird title that was like 90 miles long, and anyway, she was always one of the most outspoken singers in music. But anyway, Fiona, but yeah, so let me tell you what happened to 120 Minutes. So first of all, Dave Kendall, even though he created the show, what happened was he didn't host it. I guess in the beginning, the usual lineup of MTV VJs hosted 120. And then what happened was Dave came to host the show like 1989. He hosted it for a couple of years. Obviously, and of course there were other hosts too. Louis Largent was another host. He passed away, some time ago. And of course Matt Pinfield. Matt was probably the best host that show ever had. And Pinfield, he almost died a few years ago. I guess he was hit by a car after crossing the street to grab the mail one day, and then he had a stroke, and he was a medical mess, but he survived. But yeah, so this is what killed 120 Minutes, and unfortunately, and this makes me angry, 120 Minutes died a sad, painful death. Come! Yeah, she's going around that same twig again. I'm not going to fight twigs for the rest of my days. So what happened was what happened was 120 Minutes died a painful death because MTV was starting to change their audience. And, for many, many years, MTV was a channel that was mostly watched by white suburban males 18 to 34. And then what happened was MTV decided, but then they put on these reality shows like The Road Rules and The Real World, and those shows got huge ratings. And they felt that these reality shows would be the future of MTV, and that's the problem. MTV evolved from music videos to shitty reality, brainless, soulless reality TV, and even worse, guess who starred in some of these shows? Guess who starred in Road Rules? Pete Hegseth, of all people. That's right. And now he heads the Department of Defense. War. Oh, the Department of War. Yeah. Fucking asshole. Yeah. And have you been seeing these stupid commercials on TV with Mike Rowe from Dirty Jobs? He's now promoting these job programs to put people in vocational training instead of college, because these jobs will give you 6 figures, and they're all AI proof. You can be a welder, you can be a bricklayer, you can be folks, I went to vocational school as opposed to folks, I got vocational training versus college. I'm not making 6 figures at all. I mean, I'm living okay. I am paying my bills, but you see, folks, that's what happens when, you have a Republican running the show. That's what Republicans want. They don't want people to have good paying jobs anymore. They want them to, you know, live paycheck to paycheck. That's the Republican dream, while people like Elon Musk become trillionaires. You understand what I'm getting to? So, anyway, so that's what killing. So that's what killed 120 Minutes, and by 2000 the show was off the air. Although it did come back on MTV2 for a while, and then MTV Classic carried a similar show and carrying classic videos that they played back in the day. So the show had a cult following. And, there's people who decided to post videos on YouTube of all the videos that they played on 120. And some of the videos were they were so rare. It's like they're not even on YouTube. So they had to kind of like put a blank space on there. But anyway, all I can say about that is, he was a friend to rock and roll. I mean, he was a journalist. He lived in Thailand for a while too. And of course, here's another thing he did. Like Tom and Mary Morello, he had a show on Sirius XM called Party 360 on First Wave. And the First Wave show. So the story was, it replaced another show called Party Out of Bounds, which was hosted by Fred Schneider from the B-52s. He decided, he played a lot of very oddball stuff on there too. But anyway, it was still a fun show, nonetheless. And anyway, Dave Kendall was truly a true friend of rock and roll and an innovator, if there ever was one. Anyway, no cause of death was listed. His death announcement was announced by his good friend Matt Pinfield on social media the other day. And may he rest well. So, anyway, speaking of Sirius XM, here is the elephant in the room right now. The big fucking elephant in the room. So, here's the story. So anyway, last summer, the UK Sun published a story that proved to be false. That Howard was leaving Sirius XM and he was getting fired for being too woke. So here's what happened. It turned out, fake news, Howard re-signed a 3-year deal with Sirius. So now here's the story. The UK Sun is owned by Rupert Murdoch. Rupert Murdoch also owns the New York Post, or as I like to call them, the New York Compost. The New York Compost published a story on their page 6 that Howard Stern is now going to 1 day a week, and that he personally fired 12 of his staffers over a Zoom call, mind you. And they were going to be forced out of their jobs immediately. They did not name names. And the reason for that was because it was Howard is going down to 1 day a week after his summer vacation ends. He's got too much material to work with. So here we go. So here's the rest of the story. Yeah, my dog is dragging me into the woods where there's a lot of bugs, and I'm trying not to swat myself a billion times. I love to go to a rock concert with a bunch of bug bites. Hey, I'm used to working 15, 16, 17,000 steps a day, so I'm not too horribly worried about the cardio I'm getting today. But my dog, my poor dog, I just got bitten by a mosquito. Anyway, I'm constantly having to walk my dog and swap mosquitoes at the same time, because my dog doesn't care about bites at all. So here's the rest of the story. So back to Howard Stern. Howard Stern, so it turns out that there's truth to this story. The folks at Page 6 got it right, actually, this time. Surprise, surprise. Howard did allegedly lay off several folks. So there's no official word from Howard or SiriusXM quite yet on who got fired, who's getting, who just got the boot. Although there is only rumors so far. So somebody on Reddit made up a list of confirmed and not confirmed quite yet. So we have the confirmed. Max Sternlicht. He was the editorial and storyteller producer. There was Mike Trainer. Mike Trainer has been let go from the show. Unconfirmed. Although I think this is more confirmed than unconfirmed. Oh, my dog is just telling me to get bitten by bugs. Because she wants to go ahead and hunt her things. So here's the unconfirmed list, although it has said on LinkedIn. Jamie McCaffrey, writer, producer, and performer. She was best known as Fake Wendy on the show. Of course, there's a whackpacker named Wendy. She used to be known as Wendy the Retard. She is a special needs adult who, drinks too much Mountain Dew and even has a refrigerator in her bedroom. She, now, it was also noted that she was in a really unfunny sketch last year that involved the twin Australian women who talked at the same time. And it was more annoying than funny. Jeez. I just dropped my dog's leash because she wants to get into the woods. So here's the Jamie McCaffrey story. So yes, the story was there were these two girls two twin sisters who talked at the same time. They appeared on television during a terrible incident. I forgot what it was. And they said the same exact thing at the same exact time. So that's what happened. Jamie and another member of the show, I forgot who it was, did a sketch together where they impersonated the sisters. It got big laughs from Howard. Me, not really. It was more annoying than funny. It made me wish that Howard would bring back the strippers and the porn stars instead of this shit. So, anyway. So anyway, Jamie is allegedly gone. It was posted on LinkedIn that her tenure with the show had ended. Benji Bronk is rumored to be let go. Rashawn Rogers, Mehmet Walker. Mehmet was a bit of a jerk, unfortunately. And even Jonathan Blitt was let go. So here we go, folks. So these are just rumored people who have been let go from SiriusXM in the Howard Stern show. Howard simply said, yep, we're going to go down to just a single solitary day of the week, 1 day a week. God damn it, dog. Let's get away from the woods. I'm sorry, I can't do a podcast and swat mosquitoes at the same time. Yeah, I wish I could do this podcast from my house, but no, my father will come in and talk about how wonderful Trump is, and he'll interrupt, and my God, yeah, it's either that or doing it from my car, and it's a little too hot for that right now. So anyway, come. So let's get back to the rest of the story. So Jonathan Blitt. So anyway, these people were allegedly let go, and Howard Stern. So a lot of the media is crying, well, Howard is his heartless, soulless bastard for doing what he's doing. And then he only wants to do 1 day a week now, and he's a hat, he doesn't care about his employees, and blah, 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 blah. Okay. Folks, I want to tell you a little story. When Ozzy Osbourne, when I was a kid, I had a dream to go see Ozzy Osbourne in concert. Ozzy played Castle Farms in Charlevoix, not too far from where I grew up when I was a little boy. And then it happened. You see, what happened was, when I was a kid, my mom was Miss No You Can't. She never allowed me to do both my mom and dad were the No You Can't parents. They told me I couldn't go to Castle Farms because they were afraid that a lot of bad things would happen to me. They wouldn't let me go to Detroit because there was a member of our family who was shot at by a black gang in Detroit, and all of a sudden, black people were the Antichrist. I mean, it just goes on and on. But it's like, I look at Northern Michigan, it's far from perfect. Let's not go across the bridge. Yeah, my dog still wants to hunt. It ain't gonna happen, because I got bugs just flying over me. One of those days I kind of need deep woods off. Anyway, but here's the thing. As soon as I became a teenager, guess what happened to Castle Farms? It closed. And throughout much of my teenage years, I was lucky if one good rock concert came to Traverse City. And, and my parents were always telling me, be thankful for what you have. And what did I have? Let's see, I had a mom and dad who were bad role models. My dad was a lazy bus driver, and my mom was an adulteress. Kids at my school constantly bullied me. I had no real friends, even though my dad pushed me to make friends growing up. It's like, dude, you're the reason why I have no friends. Yeah, he even took me to a specialist when I was 15 years old. On my birthday, nonetheless. Yeah, that was my birthday gift from my dad. We went to this fucking specialist in Bel Air who wanted me to, and all he did was say all the bad things about me. Like, oh, he's staying up too late, and he would rather watch talk shows on TV instead of, going to school, and he sleeps through class. Yeah. And I'm like, okay. It's like, and I look at school, my school life, and the amount of bullying I got growing up. And, and the lack of people. And it's like, if I ever stood up for myself, I was the bad guy. And my father would always say that I'm the bad guy, and, and I'm like, man, then I looked at my cousins who all lived in Detroit. They had friends. They got to go to concerts. They got to go to a lot of good movies. I missed out on my childhood because of the foolish fucking mistakes that I had to get growing up. And, but here's what happened. That's one thing I wanted to do, go to concerts. And while I was growing up, Ozzy and his wife came up with the concept of Ozfest. Create a whole new generation of heavy metal music for the masses. But guess what? I got stuck in northern Michigan where heavy metal was verboten, especially on fucking KLT. KLT was a fucking boomer station that, played butt rock 24/7. I mean, there was nothing up there for me. Nothing. And, it was like all I was good for was, if I hung out with a group of people, was to be the yes man of the fifth wheel, who all, it's like that's what I did. I went out to, it's like one time I went out bowling with a group of assholes, and it was a 21 and over place on a Saturday night, and then what happened was, instead of bowling, guess what I did? I ended up having to constantly go in and out of the building all the time to get everybody cigarettes, and it was pouring freezing rain out there. And, it's so sad that, sometimes I look at my cousin in Detroit. He's got a great son. He was supposed to go out to upheaval today with me, but he had to cancel because his son is actually, he and his son are in Minneapolis right now, at a bowling tournament. His son is a great bowler. His son, and I look at my cousin's son and how wonderful of a life he's had. My cousin and the boy's mother, they get along great, even though they're divorced. And, they both fucked up in their relationship. As a matter of fact, my cousin's son was born right after they divorced. But guess what? He's a smart kid. He does great in school. He's a professional bowler at his age. And it's because his mom and dad wanted him to have the best life, period. My parents, well, my childhood was all about your dad did this and your mom did that. And then I would go to school and it was more drama. It was all about, what can we do to hurt Charlie today? Yeah, I know. And not only that, I started working full-time when I was 16 years old as a dishwasher at the Hacienda in Elk Rapids. And they made me work with a child molester. This fucking pedophile who was caught performing oral sex on a little boy. And the judge threw out the case due to a lack of evidence. And then years later, he was caught grabbing a boy's crotch. And this time around, there was enough evidence. And he ended up going to jail and now is a registered sex offender. And it's like, even the Hacienda fucked up. Because they decided, to have a karaoke night, from 9 to 10 at night. They allowed the kids to go up to do karaoke, but they didn't allow me. Because after 10 o'clock, when my shift ended, 21 and over. And what really bothers me was that I saw Elaine, the owner, at my great aunt's memorial. There was that part of me that said I would really want to confront her for making me work with that monster. Yeah, Ron Henry was his name. And the guy is one scary looking motherfucker. Anyway, that's what I wanted to do growing up. Go to Joe Louis Arena. And, of course, this past week, Steve Yzerman was announced he was stepping down as general manager. They were keeping him on as like a consultant. And I'm like, man, I look at it this way. I wanted a happier life in my childhood. And that's part of the reason why I'm going to a 2-day rock festival. It's because concerts make me happy, and I'm proud that I live in a part of Michigan where we get a ton of them. And it is one of the bright spots of Grand Rapids. We get a shit ton of rock concerts every year. Earlier this year, we had 9 Inch Nails. And now this weekend we have, and of course this weekend we have coming to town all these bands, including Gojira, who are Grammy winners, Papa Roach, Bill Murray, not the actor, but the Bilmuri. They're a fast-growing band. Poppy, I love Poppy. She's a cutie. Ginger's another heavy metal cutie. But here's the thing. Traverse City, that's what happens when you live in northern Michigan. They call it God's country, but you have to realize there's a lot of shitty business people. There's a lot of shady people. You get there's child molesters everywhere. You got sex offenders everywhere. I mean, there is a dark side. And I don't want to hear, well, we moved away to get away from them black people. Yeah. Because that's all I hear. And yeah, all the farmers up north, they're all KKK style people. 1 minute, let me grab a drink of Wawa. But that's what it boils down to. I did want to see Ozzy when I was growing up. And as time went by, people did complain that Ozzy was just sounding terrible on stage, and he couldn't really hit the notes anymore. I remembered, years ago he was on Late Night with Conan O'Brien, and there was a sketch where he sang a song to Conan's staff, and they actually switched over from the live performance to a pre-recorded version of what he was singing. I forgot what song it was. And I think it was because Ozzy might have sounded bad. Who knows? But then came the news that Ozzy was getting sick. Ozzy had Parkinson's. He could no longer walk. Touring just became a bitch to him. And so effective immediately, he had to retire from touring. And obviously he died last year. And when Ozzy died, when Ozzy was in his final stages of life, somebody, I don't remember who said it, but it was something to the tune of, Ozzy doesn't owe you anything. And that's how I feel about Howard. I understand. When Howard moved to Sirius in 2006, I was beyond happy that I would never have to listen to shitty terrestrial radio ever again. And, sometimes I laugh at, I'll tell you, man, I don't want to hear, well, we can't compete with Sirius. We can't compete with Spotify. So we're just winging it. That's no excuse for your failure. I mean, that means you just got to do business a little bit better. You understand? It's like, I'll tell you something. I go on Facebook all the time. There was for some reason, my algorithm ended up with this AI message from a store near Traverse. It's in Benzie County, I believe. The store is in a town called Thompsonville. And it was called Archer Country Store. It's the town's only grocery store, whatever. and it's just a tiny little store, little party store. I believe Thompsonville may have had an IGA at one point, really tiny IGA. But anyway, most of downtown Thompsonville is pretty much abandoned and boarded up. But here's what happened. The owner, so the story was, the store is owned by an Indian guy. His last name is Singh, S-I-N-G-H. And what had happened was, apparently, he sold alcohol to a minor and was caught. So he had his liquor license stripped. And people complained that the store shelves weren't kept up, and, you know, people had to drive for miles around to get real groceries, and it pissed people off. And guess what happened? He wrote this AI message saying that he's young, give him a second chance. And just because Dollar General actually has a store in Thompsonville, that is no excuse for his failure. He just needs to know how to compete. And that's how I look at terrestrial radio too. Because now they have Howard Stern, while terrestrial radio, they don't have a guy who is as good as Howard. Well, Free Beer and Hot Wings, whoop-de-doo, but Free Beer and Hot Wings suck. I mean, they've really started to suck ever since they fired Eric Zane. It was actually Town Square who fired him. So here's my take on Howard. So I feel the same way with Howard. I mean, this was a guy who grew up very modestly. He didn't grow up mega wealthy. Yeah, his dad was an audio engineer on the Underdog show, but in commercials. But he wasn't mega wealthy. He didn't live in a giant house. He lived in a black neighborhood. He had no friends growing up. He was, he had a better life growing up than I did. I will admit that. Because at least his parents stayed together. But he didn't have a great relationship with his dad. And his dad thought that he was a failure the minute he came out of his mom. And what happened was Howard knew that he had to work. And he worked hard. Yes, he failed multiple times. He failed. He couldn't even make it an AM daytimer in Massachusetts. But he moved up and of course, yes, Detroit was a big disaster for him. I mean, they flipped the format to country. But guess what happened? He persevered. He made it to Washington. He rounded up these group of people. Over his many stations. Fred Norris, he met in Hartford at WCCC. He met Robin Quivers at DC 101. And now it was the big leagues, New York City, WNBC. And guess what happened? He had monstrous ratings in New York because he did something nobody wanted to do. And that was be the man he wanted to be. And it worked out. Howard, yes, he got fired from NBC, but then you got to learn. Howard, one of the lessons I've learned about Howard Stern is that you do something bad to him. If you ever say something bad about Howard, if you F with him, guess what's going to happen? Howard, karma's going to bite you back. And that's what happened to NBC. Their radio division crumbled. And, I've seen so many people trash Howard, saying that he sucked and he deserves to rot in hell. He's a pervert. He's a sicko. And, I remembered, back in the late 90s, I mentioned KLT earlier. They had a guy named Jim Ellis. Jim Ellis was this unfunny piece of shit human being. And in an interview with a local newspaper, he said that Howard Stern sucks, man. Yeah, he's in Detroit, and he's getting killed by the gospel station. And guess what? When Jim was at KLT, his sidekick was Pete Misiak, and Pete Misiak was his newsman, and Pete was a nice guy. He passed away a number of years ago. Pete ended up in Detroit at WJR of all stations. So this is what happened. Jim said a really bad joke about John Denver passing away. John Denver died in a plane. He was flying a plane and it crashed into the ocean. And he was like, "Yeah, was he on a Rocky Mountain High?" And so his sidekick, Pete Misiak, actually told him, "I never wish I worked with you." And it was the truth. Because Pete was good friends with the previous morning guy, Tim Murphy. Tim, I told you the story. He got fired because he trashed Arby's on the air. And he didn't know they were a sponsor of his. So anyway, Jim Ellis. So long story short, Jim got fired from KLT. Actually, it was both Jim and Pete. And the reason, allegedly, it was because they wanted more money. But Northern Broadcast, the owners, cheapskate bastards, they decide, okay, we're going to go ahead and fire the guys and just put in a new morning show in. And the new morning show sucked, and the next morning show sucked, and that show sucked, and that show sucked. And long story short, Jim Ellis was brought back in the early 2000s. And this time around, and by then, Pete Misiak had moved on. So I guess he was just flying solo at the time. So he ended up doing these stupid sketches. Jeez. Dropped her leash again. Where he did impersonations. And one of the impersonations he did was that of an Asian guy. And the Asian community in Traverse City rallied against Jim Ellis. And Terry Ray actually had to apologize and said, "We will talk to Jim about all this, about what you can do and what you can't do." Long story short, Jim Ellis was fired. And eventually, of course, KLT hired Omelet and Finster, and they took the station back up to number 1. And Jim died not long afterward. He died. I guess he died of a massive heart attack. He was only 48 years old when he died. But I heard that he was overweight and, smoking big fat cigars. I mean, that's who he was. He was a douche. So anyway, Jim Ellis passed away. And I'm like, sucks to be him. Not my problem. Anyway. So, it's nice and cool out here today. That is so nice. Yeah, we're far away from the bugs, but I think they're still. I still feel some. Yeah, I think I'm gonna have a few bites when I get back to the car. So, yeah, right now we're quite a ways away. My dog is just chilling next to the water fountain. She had some good exercise so far, and so did I. So that's how I feel about Howard. We did a lot for him, especially me. And I did it by telling the truth about Matt Hanlon when he was fucking around with Howard here in Grand Rapids with KLQ and lying to everybody saying, well, the reason why we put Stern on WBBL was because, it would be a better sell to advertisers if he had Bill Simonson Huge as the afternoon host. So here's the story. The media, yes, it may be true, but once again, Howard will tell the truth, effective this fall. But here's what happened. Bubba the Love Sponge did say a few things. Number one, let's remember that he worked with Howard for many years on Sirius XM. And what happened was he left Sirius XM because of one thing and one thing only: money. He made more money on terrestrial radio than he did on satellite radio. That's why he moved back to terrestrial radio. And that's what he's doing now. He, of course, he once had a couple of syndicated stations carrying the show too. Yeah, there was a big scandal in Tampa too that he was involved with. Yeah, as a matter of fact, I guess he was programming a station there for a while, and he actually convinced a radio station here in Michigan, in Big Rapids, WBRN, to use their call letters, which is why 102.9, what was it, 100.9 in Big Rapids, it was WBRN FM for many years. Then it became WWBR. And allegedly they changed the call sign so Bubba the Love Sponge could use the WBRN call letters in Tampa. And yeah, there was a scandal because Bubba was actually I guess he was paying people to put WBRN in the ratings or listen to them 24/7. You can't do that. I guess the last time I heard from Bubba, he was now brokering his radio show in Tampa. Yeah. So, anyway, Bubba said it best. Howard did not fire his people. Sirius XM fired his people because there was just a lot of people working for him. He doesn't need 20 people doing comedy bits that will never air. It's like going to a grocery store and buying up all the milk and having it all go sour, and now you just wasted gallons of milk. I mean, it was just, there was not, if Howard's going down to 1 day a week, it's going to be dead weight on Sirius XM. And, I understand Sirius XM has to make a profit. And I will admit, some of the people they allegedly fired, I should say, were dead weight to the show and didn't add much to the program, like Mehmet Walker. And some were, they probably went online and saw some of the people who were producing bad bits that just weren't funny. But here's the thing. I know. I miss the old days of Howard. I miss the old days of busting Jackie's balls and busting Artie's balls, and I miss the strippers, I miss the porn stars, I miss It's Just Wrong, the game where if a father gets a question wrong, he has to take his daughter's clothes off. That was a funny show. But here's the thing. I know Howard wants to retire, and maybe he wants to, Sirius XM is trying to tell Howard, okay, you can do like an hour of bits and talk about the news and whatever. But then what we're going to do is for 2 hours, we're going to make you do an interview. Morning. And that interview will be with a major star. And usually his interviews are hour and a half, 2 hours, whatever. And so that's how I look at it. We'll know more when Howard goes back on the air, but bear in mind, in 2 1/3 years, Howard will be 75 years old. He's a granddad now. He's got a wife and a ton of cats and rabbits. Let Howard be Howard. Let him be. I mean, if he wants to, yes, that's my biggest fear. He'll end up like Johnny Carson and be pretty much out of view from everything. And already he's doing his home, show from home. But, yes, I get sad when people lose their jobs, and I hope some of these people will get back on their feet. So we'll see what Howard will say this September. So Okay, I gotta get going here pretty soon. Yeah, my dad. Yeah, it's all your fault, dog. It's all your damn fault. Yeah. So, yeah, getting me all bitten up by the skeeters, and yeah, it's my dad's fault too, because I don't want him to be a part of my podcast and turn it into tinfoil radio. But yes, I did watch a little bit of Trump's speech last night with him, and so the story was NBC and ABC chose not to air it. ABC decided after the speech to air parts of it as a special report. So NBC wins the award last night, basically, for as far as I know. So this is what happened. CBS chose to air it, but then like half the way through, they decided to cut out of the Trump speech, and they said, okay, we're going to do some fact checking here. And so only Fox aired the damn thing in its entirety. And it was lie after lie after lie. That people who send in their ballots are all these ballots are fake, and that we want to go back to a system where you have to spend hours in line to vote. And, this is who Donald Trump is, folks. He is a conspiracy theorist. He has no proof. And yeah, he said that now, they've released all this evidence. And a lot of it's redacted. Black line after black line. This is bullshit, folks. Donald Trump is a professional bullshitter who wants America to go back to a system where you have to stand in line at your booth, your voting place, for hours just to put in a couple of black holes. And I'm like, this is why we need the bluest Senate ever. And, these Republicans will stop at nothing to make sure this will never happen. And, of course, now I'm seeing way more ads on TV for Haley Stevens here in Michigan. Haley Stevens is a total fucking cunt. I hate that bitch so much. Did you see this online? Haley made a speech, and she was talking and acting around like she was Chris Farley doing his Foley character. Oh my God. You're gonna be in the van down by the river. Yeah, I was hoping there was a table around her so she could fall through it. Would that be a good AI animation? Yeah. Yeah, there's another video of her all drunk at an event too, at a APAC event or whatever it was, a Jewish event. And I'm like, this woman is not suitable to be our senator. I can't believe that everybody, Gary Peters is endorsing her. And so is, who else? Dana Nessel. Even Dana Nessel, who is probably one of the more progressive members of our government, is endorsing her. It's like, what the fuck, man? What the fuck are you thinking? Abdul al-Sayed is an outsider who cares about our people, who cares about giving us universal health care. And, to me, he got the Bernie endorsement, and that's what matters. Enough already with these fucking ads on TV saying that, oh, he's sexist, oh, he hates women. Oh, he gets a lot of support from the Republicans because they know that he can't beat Mike Rogers. Yeah. I got news for you. I already voted on Saturday. And guess what? My vote is going to Abdul. Haley Stevens can go fuck herself all she can and get drunk and snockered and all that. She is just an ungrateful bitch. And even more, Donald Trump has got to stop. Folks, Trump needs to be in a nursing home instead of in the White House. He is clueless on how the process works. How about helping Americans with health care and jobs instead of ballrooms, instead of UFC fights, instead of, wasting our time with living in the past? That's what Trump and the Republicans like to do. They want you to feel that it's our fault that we can't have nice things. Well, it is our fault because most Americans voted for this asshole back in 2024 because they were lied to. They thought that instead of raising the minimum wage, which needs to happen, what we need to do is no taxes on tips because it's now because now we're a gig society. No more factories, no more real jobs. So that's what it is, folks. Donald Trump is quite frankly fucking up our country. And I can't wait, folks. He's going to be out of office in 2 years. And something has, the only thing that could happen is, I understand, the here in Michigan, the primaries are August 4th. And I'm still, I understand that right now Haley's in the lead. And yeah, that's what happened. They got, I think AIPAC paid Mary Morello to get out of the race. So that way Haley could beat Abdul. And they have this horrible plan to get Abdul, screwed up. And that's what their plan is. Yeah, let's cancel him out because he hates girls. Yeah, he's a girl hater. He's sexist. He's a pig. Yeah, I got news for you. Oh, he's a millionaire. Yeah, he did release his tax records, and last year he made over $600,000. I mean, well, he's a doctor. But here's the rest of the story. I hope that Abdul wins, and this will help Donald Trump in his descent out of the White House. And now we can and of course then we can focus on 2028. That's the good news. Trump cannot run for president again. Legally, of course, he'll cry that that he technically won in 2020. He did not. He has no proof that he won, except, well, Biden was in his basement the whole time. I was out there and people were cheering. People didn't get COVID. Bullshit. Folks, America needs to change. And I've said this once, I'll say it again. I can't believe Trump is our president again. And we need to fight for jobs. We have to fight for our freedom. And, to be honest with you, and I'll say this once, I'll say it again. I look at Haley Stevens. The centralist way of fixing things doesn't work. Obama thought that his Obamacare plan would help. But still, we have way too many Americans with no feasible health care. And then, on top of that, You know, the point is, yes, it was good. It looked good on paper, and it's been bastardized too many times. And what we really need to do is create a universal health care plan that has already been successful worldwide. Why not here? And why? And I'll tell you why. It's because of these centralist Republicans, like Haley Stevens, like Bill Clinton, who all want to come in and tell people like me and you that, well, we don't want to be a communist nation. England's not a communist nation. Germany's not a communist nation. Neither is Australia. Neither is Japan. You see, Trump got into the White House because we all know, because this is the truth. I think most Americans aren't political enough. They don't care. When they turn on the news and the first news story is all about politics and it's blah, 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 blah to them, that's what it boils down to. And to me, that needs to change. People need to wake up and realize why, they're working 2 and 3 jobs, and why, they live in the cheapest apartment in town and they can't even afford it. It's because we keep electing leaders who say they would help us and they do not. And at the end of the day, we failed. So, anyway, I gotta get going. Yeah, still a little smoky out there, but it'll clear up. So good day and good luck. I'll talk to you later.